I don't think every Christian should read the Red Rising trilogy, and I also don't think that you can just outright dismiss it, which is why I want to talk about it. My name is Eric. This is Blessed and Bookmarked, and here we love to talk about books that we love to read. We love to talk about God's Word, and that's why I want to talk about the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown. This trilogy raised a bunch of questions that just stayed with me the entire time that I was reading. Mainly like, how far is too far when you're fighting for something good? In fact, I even debated whether or not I should talk about these books because I know this subject can be touchy for some people, but I did decide that it was a conversation that was worth having, so I would love to hear your comments and opinions down in the comment section. Now, if you've never heard of the Red Rising series, it's described by some people as like the ultimate bro book, but here's the quick setup. So the book takes place in a futuristic world where all of society is broken down into this hierarchy of classes. Everything is divided by color. At the top, we have the golds, which are ruling with power and fear and control and live in luxury and this very hedonistic lifestyle. At the bottom, you've got the reds, which are basically enslaved workers who have been lied to and told that their hard work and sacrifice and dedication are the things that are upholding society and helping everyone to survive. And the story follows a character named Daryl, who is a red and who ultimately finds out that everything that he's ever been told in his entire life is a lie. So naturally, he decides to do something about it and is quite literally thrust in the most tragic way possible into a rebellion, infiltrates the gold system and starts working on tearing down the system from the inside out. At this point in the story, everything seems pretty straightforward. We have corruption and rebellion and oppression, and we have someone who wants to overthrow those things. To me, it was very easy to say, yep, I'm on Daryl's side. But soon you start to notice something, that the strategy that they're using to tear down this oppressive system is through violence and manipulation and trying to amass as much power as possible. And here's the thing that caught me the most off guard about it, is that I, as a reader and as a Christian, was not resisting that. I was actually going along with it. I was rooting for it. Like, quite literally, I was talking to my wife about this book and I'm like, no, they need to kill this character. They need to do this. He's too much of a threat. He's too much of a liability. We have to get rid of him. My mindset at times was basically like, look, yeah, it's unfortunate, but if that's what it takes to come out winning on the other side, then I guess you have to do it. And that is where, as a Christian, I started to really feel some of the tension. Now, looking back, it makes me think about the Epistle to the Romans, specifically chapter 12, where the Apostle Paul is writing to believers and he says not to be conformed to the system of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, to resist paying evil for evil, but instead defeat evil by doing good, to not seek vengeance, but allow the Lord to be the one that brings justice. So I started to ask myself this very important question that I think that Christians need to ask themselves more often. What does it look like to not be conformed when everything in you and everything around you is telling you to do something a very specific way? Because in the world of Red Rising and in our world, power is everything. Strength is everything. Winning is everything. Coming out on top is the most important thing, no matter how you get there. And if we're not careful, rather than fighting the system, we start to think exactly like it. Or even in an attempt to fight the system, we adopt the strategies of the world to try to beat it. We see this all the time in these large churches that are more interested in entertaining people than they are about transforming people. And so in an attempt to fight the world, they adopt the ways of the world. Daryl and the rebellion are trying to overthrow a decidedly evil system, but are trying to do so by grasping power through the use of force and violence. They are all about taking power in order to try to fix the world. But the way of Jesus seems to be giving up power, surrender. And before I knew it, and as I often do, I started thinking about the Lord of the Rings and how these two stories kind of run parallel to each other in the sense that they're both trying to bring down this evil force, this oppressive system, but both of them are doing it in completely different ways. Because in the Lord of the Rings, they already have the power to destroy evil. The journey, the temptation is to not use it. In fact, we see characters over and over that are tempted to try to wield the power of the ring in order to bring down evil or to defend a certain city from the forces of darkness. But the entire mission is not only to not use this powerful weapon, but to destroy it. So we've got this contrast where one story is telling you amass as much power as you can to overthrow evil, and the other one is telling you to surrender and trust in something bigger than yourself. And I'm not trying to over spiritualize a sci-fi series that isn't even Christian to begin with. It was just really hard for me to not notice how different those paths are. Because when we look at the teachings of Jesus, specifically the Beatitudes and the Sermon of the Mount, we see that the people who are blessed are not necessarily the most powerful. It is the meek who will inherit the earth, the merciful, the humble. But despite that, it doesn't mean that the novels were without merit, because there were a lot of things that I did like about them. I thought that the characters were written exceptionally well. No one was flat. Everyone had a different kind of nuance to them. It wasn't just clear black or white, but there were messy characters who made terrible decisions. Our protagonist wasn't perfect, and neither were some of the villains just completely unredeemable. Even the people you're supposed to hate in this book, you really start to understand. The dialogue was sharp and witty. There were tons of lines that as I read them, they just kind of stuck with me. And the pacing was great, with just a few exceptions, I think, in the third book, but everything kind of just kept moving along in a really well developed pace. And there were so many twists and turns along the way. I mean, just things that left you like jaw dropped, right? Like there were a few times I wanted to just chuck the book across the room, but especially the climaxes, the end of the novels of the original core series. You thought you knew how everything was going to work out, and it just went a completely different way. But out of all the things that I could talk about, I think that the theme that surprised me the most that was in this novel, that I wrestled with the most, which is the thing that surprised me, is that the theme of redemption. And you would think that as a Christian, you're completely open to this redemption arc, but there were some characters in this book that just did horrible things, and you're like, there's no way that this character can ever turn over a new leaf or change or be redeemed or anything. In fact, there were times I did not want a character to be redeemed. Like they did stuff and I was like, there is no way that they are coming back from that. And yet sometimes they did, not always perfectly. It wasn't like a 180 change all the time, but some characters changed in a way that made you stop and think. Because is anyone ever really truly so far gone that they can't have redemption? And I really appreciated that, because in this story that talks about the struggle for power and exerting control over so many people, you caught glimpses of a different alternative, of something that was better, of a light in the midst of that darkness. And honestly, that's a deeply Christian idea. So there's one question that's been hanging over this entire video that I don't want to leave without addressing it. Should Christians read this book series? So clearly, this is not a clean series. There is tons of violence, very much akin, if not more so, than the Hunger Games. It's very derivative of that in some ways. I guess you can kind of say it's a little tropey in that sense, but I thought it was very original in many other senses. But the violence is real and it's in your face. There's also some language that happens throughout this series. I think it kind of gets a little bit more towards the end. And while there are references to sexual content and things like that, there's only really one scene in all the 3 books that I read that is like an openly sexualized scene. Very easy to skip if you wanted to. So for some people, that is a very clear boundary. No, you don't want to read the book. Completely understandable, and I respect your convictions on that. And I'm also not here to tell you what you should read, what you shouldn't read. That's a personal choice. But I do kind of think that maybe there is a better question to ask rather than should I read it or not. So rather than asking ourselves, is it okay for me to read this? Maybe we should be asking ourselves, what do those kind of books and stories do to me? Because for me, the story wasn't just entertaining, it exposed something inside of me. The temptation to let the ends justify the means. How easy it is to start with this right goal in mind, something like justice, and then drift into something like revenge. And how quickly we can take something like doing what's right and end up with doing whatever it takes. The world says change things by taking control and forcing the change. The gospel points us to something different, to our complete inability to change anything within us or the world around us, and an all-powerful Savior who, rather than forcing his will on every single person, chose to die on a cross, to surrender his life in order to redeem humanity. So maybe that's where the value in a story like this lies for some of us. Not that it necessarily points to a right way of thinking, but that it forces us to wrestle with questions about what we think is right. So no, I don't think that the story is for everyone, but if you do read it, don't just follow the story. Pay attention to what it's pulling out of you as you're reading, because honestly, that might be the most important part. I'm curious, if you have read the story and you're a Christian, please let me know in the comments what you thought about it and what you walked away knowing. I mentioned The Lord of the Rings earlier, and if you want to watch a video where I cover the themes of The Lord of the Rings and how they're related to the Bible, there's a video that I'm actually quite proud of. It's kind of like a love project that I made, and I'll leave it here at the end so that you can check it out. Thanks for watching. If you found any value here, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell. I really appreciate you spending your time here. My name is Eric. Stay blessed, stay bookmarked.